Hello again, everyone. I'm Tom Nagorski, managing editor at the Cipher Brief, here for a conversation today about the situation at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. The upheaval there, and given who we are at the Cipher Brief and the things we cover, we're focused less in this conversation on the politics, the legal issues that are in play, more on potential national security implications and questions that have been raised on that front. And that's where we come to finding our guest, Javed Ali, a member of our network of experts at the Cipher Brief. He has held senior roles at the FBI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and National Security Council, with a focus on counterterrorism. And so, Javed, perhaps through that lens of national security, you can help us to understand what is at stake here, and to remind our audience that we're talking about firings or potential firings of not just senior officials at the Bureau, but a lot of field agents who have to, I guess, present their credentials or do paperwork and so forth. Big picture, what's your concern as a former intelligence community official when you hear that?
So, Tom, nice to be with you, and I've always enjoyed my partnership with the Cipher Brief since I've left government in 2018. So, another great opportunity, and thanks to you and Suzanne for giving me the time. So, backing up, sort of looking at some of the points you just raised. I mean, this is I would argue, unprecedented moment in the history, at least the modern history of the FBI, where I can't remember a time when the Bureau was under this much pressure with respect to senior management folks being removed. I mean, there's lots of media reporting about that over the last 2 or 3 days. Potential of other agents and analysts and other staff who might also be removed based on their involvement in cases involving President Trump or January 6th. So it's still not clear how deep these cuts or changes to the FBI will unfold. But I do think it is different, and it does have the potential to really impact national security if the cuts go much deeper than they have up until now.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsekedge.com.
To get into some specific comments that have come out since the news hit, I'll just read you a couple of things. You've probably seen them too. The FBI Agents Association, which of course would be, quick to comment, and they were, said that the potential dismissal of hundreds of agents would, quote, severely weaken the Bureau's ability to protect the country from national security and criminal threats, and went on to say would ultimately set the Bureau and its new leadership up for failure. Former Governor Chris Christie, former prosecutor also, Chris Christie, said on one of the Sunday talk shows yesterday that in the threat assessment world we have now, to lose that many agents and then take a year to a year and a half to try to replace them is incredibly dangerous for our national security. What is, a lot of us don't think, outside that world of whatever the reasons are for dismissal. If you need to bring hundreds of agents back on, is the governor right? That's an onerous thing that may take some time and become a national security issue itself.
Well, let's just look at the FBI as an organization. It, on paper, is relatively large. I mean, it is the country's premier federal law enforcement agency. It is also, by law and policy, the country's domestic security service or intelligence service. So it is engaged on both the sort of traditional criminal aspect of what the FBI does, but also the national security side every single day here at home and to a degree abroad as well. But the bulk of the FBI workforce is actually not in Washington, D.C. It's distributed throughout the 56 different field offices in the United States. And there are very big field offices, there are medium-sized field offices, and then there are relatively small offices and even other like sub offices called resident agencies. And there's no one size fits all approach. And so this is the issue with the FBI. If there was now going to be a shift in policy from President Trump and his team to make the FBI smaller or significantly smaller, what will the impact be to the FBI's mission, either on the criminal side of the house or the national security side of the house? The FBI can't engage in all these missions with a reduced staffing profile, even distributed throughout the field offices and then the headquarters element. And so what would fall off the table, or what would get minimized and what would get enhanced, either on that sort of traditional criminal side or on the national security side? So these are all the questions that have to be considered when we're thinking about potentially making the FBI smaller. I don't even know if that happens, if there's a plan to bring in the next round of folks like Governor Christie suggested. The plan might actually be to make the FBI smaller.
Before we get to that possibility, just so I understand, and our audience understands, what is involved in the vetting, hiring, training, and so forth of a new cadre of agents, or just one agent?
Well, I also want to make clear, I was not a special agent. So I came into the FBI as a senior intelligence analyst, and my pathway to the FBI was very unusual. So I don't want to sort of describe that, but folks who are coming into the FBI either as agents and then analysts have to go through first a background investigation, and you have to get reviewed to make sure you are able to handle the requirements of either of those kind of work streams on the agent side and then the analyst side. Assuming you pass your background investigation and everything that comes with that, then you have to go down to Quantico, Virginia, where the FBI Academy is. And that's where now both new agents and analysts go for training for, I think it's 18 weeks, at least for agents, and it might be a little bit shorter for analysts. So there's at least a 3 or 3.5 month period on the front end, even when you come into the FBI. And then after that, then you get your first assignment. And your first assignment is usually going to be on the agent side in a field office, so you can learn the tradecraft of running investigations, either on the criminal side or the national security side. And again, there are 56 offices throughout the United States. Not everyone goes to Los Angeles and New York. I mean, the FBI has to staff the offices all over the country. Same thing for the analyst side. And then it probably takes another couple of years for both the agents and analysts to feel sort of comfortable in their initial jobs. And then it's a question of, do you want to stay in that first assignment, whether it's in Washington or anywhere else? Do you want to progress into a different mission area, or do you want to stay focused on that first either duty station or mission topic or issue that you were focused on? And then FBI careers can go in a bunch of different directions. But that's how it all unfolds. So it does take a relatively long period of time to get folks into the system and then up and running in their first assignment.
Right. Now, you said you weren't, a field agent. You also weren't an FBI director, but just you know the institution well, and you mentioned the potential of a smaller bureau, and we may be seeing that across government right now, depending on who you listen to. Is that inherently a bad thing, or restructure and tightening is something that happens to a lot of organizations?
Yeah, I think every 4 to 8 years, it's normal for administrations and then the departments and agencies in the executive branch to look inside themselves and do an assessment of, who are we as an organization? Are we structured the right way? Are we aligned to the priorities that the administration wants us to now tackle? Do we have the right funding from Congress to go out and pursue those priorities? I mean, these are all the sort of the questions that happen in those periods of time. One thing that most people don't realize that was a pretty significant internal change in the FBI in the mid 2000s, and that was a direct result of my position when I got hired into the FBI in 2007, was something called the National Security Branch, which was not driven by law per se, but certainly recommendations from the 9/11 Commission and the 2003 WMD Commission that the FBI needed to internally restructure these different components of the organization to have a more corporate focus on national security. So by 2005, the FBI did that. So within that national security branch, you have one senior agent. The title is an executive assistant director of the national security branch. And then within that branch, there's the counterterrorism division, the counterintelligence division. I believe the terrorist screening center is in there as well. And then the weapons of mass destruction directorate. So again, now going forward, will that national security branch survive? Will it be will there be a consolidation of that? Will some pieces of the branch be reapportioned? And then where will the people and the resources attached to those components, where will they go? Those, I think, are all questions that are probably on the table as we have the prospect of a new director coming in.
Yeah. And I'm reminded as you were ticking off that, long and kind of stark list of challenges of the last conversation you and I had, which was, I believe, about the Islamic State and other threats to this country. So, it's and it's a good reminder that the FBI is knee deep in that kind of work as well, right?
So when I got hired in 2007, and I was actually at the Department of Homeland Security before, the position that I came into literally never existed in the FBI. It was called the Senior Intelligence Officer for Counterterrorism. My position as the Senior Intelligence Officer cadre focused on counterterrorism was the first one. And eventually there was a much bigger pool of other senior intelligence officers. But I think that was a message that the FBI was setting, that even at a small level, not necessarily me as a person, but this position, that we're going to make it focused on counterterrorism. And then in my FBI career, I would argue that counterterrorism really was the FBI's number one mission. Not that it wasn't engaged in other missions, it was, but counterterrorism, both at home and abroad, was so significant. And the Bureau was every day focused on something that was designed to help keep the country safe, either with investigations or disruptions or intelligence collection. And again, if the FBI is going to do less on a significant priority, at least in the past, like counterterrorism, well, what is the trade-off on that? And how much risk are we willing to take as a country, whether from ISIS Khorasan or other terrorist threats out there?
And I assume it's too early, or have you seen any indications that worry you on that front, or not yet?
It's just too early to tell. I think we're going to have to wait and see how the confirmation process goes. And then if Kash Patel does come in, what will be his sort of vision or blueprint for the FBI? One thing I've also thought about, again, there's nothing out there to suggest this, is that if that national security focus starts to get smaller, it's not going to go down to zero, but again, gets smaller, will there be a renewed focus on sort of more traditional crime, that it is, I would argue, connected to President Trump's major priority on border security and immigration and drugs? The FBI post 9/11, for the most part, hasn't really played a role in that because they've had their hands full on all these other issues that we've talked about. But it will be fascinating to see if the FBI is asked to do more on that front, either on its own or in support of DHS operations or missions. And then again, what will be the trade-off for making that decision?
Last question then, Javed Ali, and it's also probably one that's tough to answer because you're not on the inside anymore, but an organization going through whatever it is that it is going through right now, call it upheaval or unrest or what have you, morale has to be an issue. And I would imagine morale in any workplace is always, you want to have good morale. Take us to the extent you can inside the Bureau at the moment as they read about, hear about, fill out papers and so forth. How big an issue do you think that is, again, through the national security lens?
Yeah, I would have to imagine that morale is being affected at some level, just because, as we talked about at the beginning, sort of the pressure that's on the FBI right now just seems unprecedented. But at the same time, I mean, the FBI agents and analysts and all the other folks who work in the FBI every day, they show up and they have a job to do. And despite all the external pressure, they have to stay focused on these different issues and different missions because there's a lot at stake by being distracted. So one would hope there's some ability to deal with the reality of what's happening, but not also get completely distracted and create more risk when it comes to sort of preventing these threats from materializing or collecting intelligence on them, or even working with working with U.S. attorneys and other folks at the state and local level to actually arrest people, because that's the day-to-day job of the FBI.
Yeah, and it never stops. All right, Javed Ali, thank you so much. By the way, joining us from Ann Arbor, Michigan today, Cipher Brief expert, and we really appreciate your insights as always. Thanks, Javed.
All right, thanks, Tom.